And joint practice number 1 is in the books, and we have a lot to talk about. Eddie Paskal and Jesse Merrick here for another episode of the Raiders Training Camp podcast presented by SiriusXM. And Jesse, we were talking about it before we started rolling. We look at today's session with the 49ers, call it about 2 hours more or less. Yeah. And it felt like, I don't want to say it started slow, but it started, what's the word I'm looking for? Not as perhaps like aggressively as we would have thought. Yeah. But by the time that this thing wrapped up, I mean, the boys were flying around out there, a lot to discuss, and it was a lot of fun really on that back half.
Yeah, I think it was kind of like a plane taking off, getting going, and then bam, yes. It was in full swing towards the end of practice, which is what you like to see. I mean, just a ton of good work overall. And I know that's cliche to say because all they did was talk about, there's going to be a lot of good competition and everything like that. But when you have a team like the 49ers who have one of the best rosters in the league, at their disposal in terms of the dogs on that team, you're going to get a lot of good work, and that's exactly what they got today. It was fun to watch, and I love the fact that it did ramp up towards the end, especially when they went to that 2-minute drill. And that was really, I think, when the Raiders offense started clicking too.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that 2-minute in just a little bit. But let's just go in chronological order, right? One-on-ones. You and I were both keyed in on the one-on-ones today. It's a lot of fun. It's really after kind of the stretching, and we're going through periods. Like, this is the first, all right, let's see what we got cooking. And a few guys that really stood out to both of us. Let's just start with the obvious ones. Chandler Jones, I think, had a really nice one-on-one period today. Really looking, I know it sounds crazy to say, but faster than he did the past couple of weeks. But the other guy, he seems to be the talk of the town today, Nesta J. Silvera.
And the 7th rounder just turning heads today. And he did it in multiple ways. I saw him bull rush a guy one time, just kind of tossed him, and then comes back to the next rep with a little bit of speed move, working around the guy. I mean, I was really impressed with what I saw out of him. I hadn't had an opportunity to watch him a ton throughout camp, just kind of geographically where they are most of the time, and they were right in front of us. And so really impressed with Nesta and what he managed to do there, not only when they were doing one-on-ones, but they kind of worked some 2-on-2 and did some stunts and stuff together. I mean, showed that explosiveness and the nastiness to his game. Max kind of talked about it up on the podium as well, and it was easy to see. You talk to anybody and you say, hey, who stood out among the front really, and they're going to be talking about Nesta J. Silvera. A really good day for him on day 1 of joint practices.
Shameless plug there. We were talking to Dave Ziegler on Upon for the Review yesterday, and Dave was talking about joint practices in the preseason. He said you're really going to find out, you're going to learn a lot about guys where you're seeing someone different, the lights come on, who kind of elevate to that next level. And certainly it felt like Nesta did that today. And in the spirit of transparency, right? Like, he's not a guy that I've written his number down a lot over the past, call it 11 practices at training camp. But today, something clicked, right? And I think there might be, logically, hey, they were a lot closer to us than they were. You're seeing him go against guys that aren't our offensive line. But he was a guy okay, I see a big fella. And so I think that I'm really excited to see how he follows this up tomorrow against a really good Niners offensive line.
I would say so too, because they're probably going to be talking about him. Hey, this guy kind of gave us some issues. Now let's see what he does when they're kind of looking out for him a bit. And Max talked about it too, that you can sit there, you can coach all the technique and all these different things. You just can't coach that want to, that attitude. And he said Nesta was a guy that had that from day 1 as soon as he walked in the building. And that really did show in a big way today. We always talk about it. Coaches will know when a guy is hiding. He did not hide. He didn't look like a 7th-round pick out there. He looked like a guy that was like, hey, this is my opportunity to show you what I can do against a really good offensive line, and he came through.
Yeah, you also can't coach 6'2", 315.
No.
Can't coach that, right? You can coach a lot of things, but the physical gifts are not one of them for Nesta. Shifting to the Raiders offensive line, though, Dylan Parham, I think, another really good day. He's turning into, and I mean this let's not, overblow it, but it feels like very Colton-esque, right? Where you and I have talked about it a bunch, where it feels like we don't talk about Colton a ton just because he's going into work, doing his thing, dominating, on to the next. And it very much feels like Dylan Parham is kind of following in that footprint, following along that path, because he's a guy that we haven't talked about him a ton, but when we have, we're like, looks pretty darn good.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time. If you don't have to talk about the offensive line, that is a good thing. And specifically with Parham, Jimmy talked about it today, that they have kind of similar mindsets in the sense that it's kind of just like water off a duck's back, no matter what happens, made out of Teflon, whatever one you want to throw out there. So impressed with the way that kid just continues to come into work. Doesn't look like a second-year guy.
No.
Has looked very comfortable last year, moving around to multiple positions, but already has followed it up now here in year 2. looking like a guy that's like a seasoned vet, not to like overreact and put too much on him, but like he has definitely looked the part in that regard. It's been impressive.
But to your point, too, like when you hear him talk at the podium, we've heard from him a handful of times throughout the offseason program and training camp, like a dude who doesn't sound like he was a rookie in the NFL last year. A very measured, mature demeanor, speaking with purpose with everything that he says. And he very much looks and sounds like a dude who's going to be in the league for a long time and is going to be a productive guy along the interior of that offensive line for a hot minute here.
Yeah, when I think that's kind of a shout out to just the way he kind of came up at Memphis and everything. Totally. He played like all along the offensive line. I don't think there was a position that he didn't play.
He came in as a tight end too, right?
Yeah, he did actually. I forgot about that. And I think he even took some snaps at both tackle positions as well, so it wasn't just the interior. So like he comes in with a comfortability, I think, in his game, and then comes into a system where they're going to move him around. So it's like I just kind of get the feeling that for a second-year guy, there's not a lot that he hasn't already seen, which is awesome.
Yeah, 100%. And we talk about the skills, the qualities that Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler covet, and they've been very open about the importance of versatility. Yeah. What can you do, but what can you also do? And Dylan Parham is like just the epitome of that, a guy who can play center, who is, like you said, played both tackle positions, who can move along the interior. Like, you need to have dudes like Dylan Parham. Now, obviously, I think they would love to have one spot for him to be in to focus his time and energy. Yeah. But I mean, you got to have dudes like that when the bullets are flying and something weird happens. Hey, we got to pop to the other side for a half. Can you do it? And the answer appears early on, yes.
Yeah, and that's the thing we always talk about on the offensive line. It's not a matter of if, but when injuries pop up. And so having guys like him are huge. Another guy, a popular guy since he signed with this team, undrafted rookie free agent in Curtis McClendon. He looked pretty good the couple reps that I caught of him as well. So you love to see that out of a guy that, like, for whatever reason, fans just kind of latched on to him early on. I remember when you guys announced all the moves, he was a guy that a lot of people were like, oh, he's my dark horse to kind of break in and get a starting spot or anything like that. Impressed with what I saw out of him today, able to sit back there and stop a really good defensive line for the 49ers that are very well coached, too. You can definitely see that. And then also in the middle, too, Andre James, another solid day from him. He's been that other guy that we don't really talk a whole lot about, but has been real steady. And I think it's worth noting doing that while he's acclimating to a new quarterback. Like, that's not easy.
No, not at all. And real quick, one thing that, before we talk about the rest of the one-on-ones, one thing that I really enjoy about joint practices, whether it's the Niners, the Rams, whoever it may be, is you get to see how coaching staffs kind of structure the first part of their practices. Yeah. So we saw the Niners going through some drills that we don't see the Raiders do and vice versa. So it is always nice to kind of be like, oh, okay, like this is a nice little wrinkle, especially for us who have seen so much training camp football over the past 3 weeks. To see something a little different was a blast.
No, it definitely was. Like, you see the Niners D linemen come over and their coach had on, it almost looked like a big old flak jacket, but it was the pad that you would see on a sled, and then he's got the two pads on his hands, kind of like running around like a little dummy, and they're running, pass rushing him, do those different moves. And so it was cool to see that because you get a different look on like how each of them coach it, and the energy that they bring to the table, and seeing guys like Fred Warner running around out there as well. So it is a nice little mix-up to see, and you can kind of compare and contrast how the different staffs do it. So it's a lot of fun in many regards. It's almost kind of like a kid in a candy store today because you're looking around. There's like, let me look over here. Oh, and then down there at the DBs, and then way across the field to the quarterbacks, whoever. Like, you're kind of looking around. There's so much. You're like, what do I look at this moment?
Yeah, and the timing of it's perfect too, right? Like, we can be super honest. Where camp is long, right? Yeah. I don't care if you're a player, if you're someone like us who talks about the team, your support staff. Training camp is long. So the fact that we have gotten to this point in the calendar, let's see something different. Let's see something new, and that's exactly what we got. But speaking of the offensive and defensive line of the respective teams, the matchup that we all wanted to see today, going into it, we had it circled, is Max Crosby, Trent Williams. Did not disappoint, and it felt like a pretty even matchup between those two. Max getting the better of Trent sometimes, Trent obviously getting the better of Max, but really, we talk about good on good. That's the epitome of it. That's the definition right there.
It is. Max said he wants to be, the best to ever play the position, wants to be the best defender in the league, and he's like, I'm going up against the guy who is literally the best. So that was awesome. Some really good on good work there between the two of them. There were times when Trent would win the drill, but it was very clear that Max was giving him issues. He talked about it today on the podium, just saying there was one time when he made a move and he thought he was going to bull rush him, and then he busted out the spin move on him, and he was like, I didn't know what to do, so I just grabbed you, type of thing. And a guy that's that big, in Trent, that's moving around trying to get a handle on a guy like Max, who's just that like energizer bunny, got to give you issues. And again, that's a guy that has seen anything and everything in this league. So to see Max put that guy in a bit of a bind is definitely big, and that's one that's going to be so much fun to watch tomorrow. And the fact that, too, Like, this can't go understated. The fact that they can go bounce ideas off of each other. We talked about it before we got rolling. They're not playing in a real regular season game this year, So, like, you can go ahead and kind of work back and forth and do the secrets of the trade and help Max out and vice versa with Trent. And so that's the stuff that I think is only going to take Max's game to that next level, learning from a guy like him.
Yeah, and to your point, obviously, these two teams not going to see each other. The only time they would is in the Super Bowl, right? Yeah. But I do wonder if tomorrow Max goes, hey, like, would you mind giving me look X on this play? And Trent doing the same things and really having an opportunity to work through some things, to workshop and to, say, like, hey, I know we can't do this in a regular season game. Like, the opportunity doesn't prevent itself, but, like, let's help each other get better.
Yeah, and that's the thing, too. I noticed, like Von Miller, does his pass rush summit out here every year. And it's very cool to see those guys all get together. I know they play the same position, but a couple years there's been some offensive linemen that have shown up there as well and worked through them and saying, kind of give them that, like, hey, this is what I'm thinking in that scenario and different things like that. And that's where, like, the really good work comes and where a guy like Max can continue to add more stuff into his bag, into his arsenal of tricks to bust out on these guys. So, like, again, excited to see, okay, now you've gone up against them. And then I know they did it in the regular season last year, but now you've gone against them today. Let's see what that battle looks like tomorrow as the comfortability is there a little bit more. And obviously, Max is going to kind of try and continue to stack those days. So I'm excited to watch that one again. And luckily, it was right in front of us today. Hopefully, it is again tomorrow, too.
And again, I don't have any scientific metric for this, but it feels like the Max Crosby spin move was a little faster, a little tighter, a little more compact than we have seen the past couple weeks. Not in saying that it hasn't been fast and tight, whatever, but like just seeing Max go against someone that isn't a Raiders offensive lineman, it felt like there was that added level of like you kind of would expect for joint practice.
Yeah, I would say it's probably somewhere in that, like, this is practice / a game. Yeah. Max was right there in the middle somewhere in that energy. And this is a guy that brings it every day, like, obviously. But it is wild when you can see him kind of kick things up a notch and the intensity there, and that definitely was the case today.
Real quick, before we talk about some of the team stuff, you talk about Max bringing that energy. And one thing that when he was talking in his post-practice presser today that I thought was really interesting, he said, like, there's been moments where the coaches are like, all right, like, let's bring it from here to here. And he goes, like, no, this is who we're going to be. This is who this defense is going to be. And we talked about Max so much the past couple months about being the heartbeat of this defense, really the heartbeat of this team, one of the faces of this franchise. And when your big dog, all pro, all everything guy is doing that for a practice and a joint training camp, or excuse me, a practice and a joint practice, like, that's what you want to see.
No, you definitely do. The guys always talk about it with Jimmy that, like, he's the same guy every day. That's how Max is as well. And look, he's the same guy every day that's got it cranked up to like 150%, nonstop. And you have to respect him, to be able to play like your hair is on fire literally every single play and do it at practice and always bring that energy, always interacting with the fans, loves the energy when people are out here too. So, like, that's just so impressive. And again, like you said, you need guys like that, but it makes such a huge difference when it is like your top dog that is bringing that juice every day.
Yeah, and he's a tone setter, not only for the defense, right? Not for the only Patrick Graham's group, but Max is the tone setter for this entire team. Yeah. Everything that this 90-man roster does, like I said, Max is the heartbeat too. He is kind of the emotional, spiritual guru, the whole deal, right?
You name it, he does it.
Exactly, you name it, and he does it. Let's shift ahead to what we saw in some of the team periods, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to say pleasant surprise because I don't think that's fair, but I was pleasantly surprised by how well I think the defense played today for the Silver and Black.
Yeah.
Amik Robertson, friend of the program, Amik Robertson, a couple really nice plays. Max noted that Marcus Peters had a pick today. And again, you and I didn't see this one because there's so much going on, but I'm not about to call Max Crosby a liar.
No.
So, but it kind of just goes to that theme of this secondary has been so active around the football. We've seen it in practice when it's Raiders on Raiders, but now Raiders on Niners, we saw the same thing again.
Yeah, no, it is. Like I said, I didn't see the one with Marcus, but the guy's got over 30 career interceptions. Chances are he came down with one today, and so just really impressed with them to be able to do that against this Niners offense that has Ayuk, that has Debo, that has Christian McCaffrey. Brock Purdy, obviously what he did, he took the NFL by storm last year. So just a really efficient group. One thing I did notice too is, with the Niners, they get the ball to their playmakers in space quick and let them kind of move around and do their thing. Well, those completions were there, but the defense was swarming to them and attacking the ball, ferociously, and that's what you kind of want to see. You don't want to see them sitting back like, oh man, these guys have some moves, have some juice, whatever, could juke me. Like, they are just right up in there. It's like, the whole cliche 11 hats on the ball type of thing. I mean, they were all swarming the ball carrier wherever they did get it. So I was impressed with that. Going against a team again that's had a lot of success in this league, and as you noted, Big Meek coming down. I mean, the guy was always around the ball. A handful of PBUs as well. Duke Shelley, in terms of the defensive backfield, he had an interception today as well. Another guy that was just all over the place. You look for the ball, he kept popping up left and right. So a really good day, a real big step forward for him. And he's a guy that's, I think, kind of been, like, I don't want to say sneaky because he's made some good plays throughout camp, but today I think really popped even more and got more people's attention.
Yeah, we talk about Nesta, right, doing his thing. Duke Shelley, another guy that it kind of feels like he rose to the moment today against the 49ers. But really, when we look at what the Niners offense was able to do, and I think it's also important to give the caveat, like, hey, this is one joint practice, right? Like, this is not an indication of what 2020.
Talking about practice?
Yeah, exactly. This is not what not an indication of what 2023 is going to look like for either of these teams. But like, just in a very general sense, as we watched the 2-hour session today, which is what we're talking about, the Niners' first-team offense had a hard time moving the football down the field. Yeah. Now, that's not to say that some of that was by design or they're working through things or Kyle Shanahan is putting them in specific situations. But all the same, like, you have to give credit to the Raiders' defense for making life difficult. Now, again, we're not fully going to the ground. We're not doing any of that kind of stuff. So you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. But what you wanted to see, or I should say what we've seen from the Raiders defense in the first 2 weeks of camp, is what we saw again today against a really, really talented Niners offense.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing that we continue to talk about through camp is this secondary. And I remember talking about it before, and when they signed Marcus Peters, that there was a lot of like kind of unknown about what that group was going to look like. And those guys looked solid today. Coming down with interceptions, being in the right place at the right time. For Amik specifically, too, I think he ended one of the 2-minute periods, I believe, with a pass breakup to kind of end that drive for the starting Niners offense. So, coming up with not just like big plays and being in the right position, but doing it in like key moments, because they orchestrate these like 3rd and goal, 3rd and whatever, doing it in those big moments. And that's going to translate over to the games. You have to do it now in order to do it on Sundays. And so to see that translate over against a team, like you noted, like we talked about ad nauseum, who has just a great roster in the Niners, that it has had a lot of success and brings a system that is very difficult to slow down into things. Very impressed with what I saw out of the Raiders defense for sure.
Yeah, and shifting to the offensive side of the football, coming into today for obvious reasons, a lot of eyes on Jimmy G for on the field, for off the field, for the history, for the drama, for all of it, right, Jesse? One, I think you hear, we hear Jimmy talk after practice, unflappable, right? Like, he goes into that room today. You were down there, a lot more cameras, a lot more people than there typically are, and he knows the questions he's going to get asked. Handles it like a pro handles it, very focused on life here in Las Vegas, winning for this team. And I know it's like a small thing, but I was really impressed by the way he handled everything surrounding his media session today.
Yeah, the guy, I mean, anytime he's at the podium, he kind of commands it. And it's not in like a, like, all right, I'm just going to get through this type of thing. Like, the guy, like, genuinely seems like he's comfortable up there, like he's cool with talking with us. Kind of like the guys I'll talk about, they say he's just like one of the dudes. You get the sense that you're up there just kind of chopping it up with one of your buddies, and I appreciate that.
And I think some of the slips in language is the perfect definition of that. It's a perfect example, right? Like, I remember the first day that he came in here, he had one of those expletive slips, let's call it. And I remember telling my buddies, I was just so struck by, like, this is just a dude, right? Yeah. Like, this is a dude who's going to get caught and caught in a moment where he's just chopping up with his buddies, and you say something that is not maybe TV appropriate, but I mean, that's just who he is in the best possible way. And that, like I said, coming into today, he knows the questions that were going to come, 1,000%. But I was really impressed by the way he handled it, and really the way he's handled this whole, all the media attention he's gotten since he got to the Silver and Black.
Yeah, one of the questions was asking just in terms of like where his motivation comes from. If it's from the outside, if he's internally motivated and stuff like that. And he kind of said, he's like, some guys put that stuff out there. He's like, for me, I kind of internalize it. I don't put that stuff out there like that. And he's like, this is just me and who I am and me being myself, and I'm not changing anytime soon. Like, he's comfortable in his own skin, comfortable with the way that he does it. But we've also seen and heard him out there talking a little mess with his former teammates, with his current teammates, you name it, all that stuff. And so this is a guy that does have that edge to his game. And so, Jimmy has receipts on some people around the league, throughout his time there. And I'm sure when people start talking about him here as well. So this is a guy that is very internally motivated for sure. And you love to see that he's comfortable in those competitive situations.
So shifting to Jimmy on the field today, right? And you and I, again, to be transparent with the good audience, right? We were on a far side of the field today, so we didn't see the first portion of the Jimmy G offensive explosion today, right? Yeah. You and I were both hearing and seeing the same things. Maybe a slower start for Jimmy, perhaps not as crisp as he wanted it to be. But as we progress through the session, and especially in that last period, Jesse, the 2-minute drill, go put points on the board, He looked awesome, dude. He really did.
Anytime they've gone to the 2-minute drill so far in camp, I've been impressed with it. But again, specifically today, I mean, just taking through my notes, kind of the play-by-play notes of it all. I mean, you go through Jimmy to Jacoby. He threw one ball that wasn't great to Abdullah, but then he hits Hooper, hits Jacoby again, hits Hunter, and then bam, touchdown to
Hooper.
To Hooper, thank you.
And really on that play to Hooper, I don't mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
Like, he put the ball where only Austin Hooper was going to get it, right? Like, he threw him open. He said, hey, bud, this is where the ball is going to be. Go get it.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, not to be, too living in a world of hyperbole, one of the better balls we've seen from Jimmy this entire camp, I think.
No, it definitely was. Like, he was in double coverage, but it was like a low and away only to where he could get it. He had to slide to get it. It wasn't like he threw it down there. That was not where he wanted to place it. Like, you could tell it was a precision pass through that coverage in order to get it there. One, shout out to Hooper for coming down with it. But again, just a straight-up dime from Jimmy. Was really impressed with that one.
And real quick, even if he doesn't come down with that pass, he got the flag, too.
Exactly.
Like, we had the officials out here today, so even if that isn't complete, even if Austin Hooper doesn't make the SportsCenter catch, like, you're still first and goal.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing, too, for me, just out of that 2-minute drill, that's when you see like how comfortable someone is in an offense, And Jimmy said he's still slowly but surely kind of working his way back, trying to get his feet underneath him, both literally and figuratively.
Yes,
he did say. But like at the same time, you see him in that 2-minute drill, and something clicks, and he just gets going, and he's reacting, and he's dinking and dunking and hitting Hunter and Jacoby over the middle of the field, and then bam, that just dart to Hooper for the touchdown. Just impressed the way that he was able to move the ball down the field against a really good Niners defense and a group that also knows his game as well.
Yeah, I mean, there is certainly no lack of familiarity on the defense side of football for the Niners, Niners looking at Jimmy G. But I'm glad you brought up Hunter Renfrow, right?
Yeah.
Because Hunter is one of those guys. Yes, we see him cook during practice. Yes, we see all the incredible routes and the intricacies and the preciseness or precision of his game.
Yeah.
But to see it against a really, really good defense today, like that was an awesome thing to see in person. And we talk about how Jimmy's kind of growing, and he was asked today about growing with Devontae. I'm really excited to see how he grows with Hunter over the next weeks, and obviously as we get closer to week 1.
Yeah, he said that guy's a dog, right?
Yeah.
Says he's made of the right stuff, and Hunter just continues to show that throughout camp. Another guy that we think seems to be just in a really good headspace after what was a tough year for him last year. And so Hunter's one of those guys that should and can and looks like he will thrive in this offense. You've seen so many slot receivers in this offense over the years. Josh McDaniels' system really thrive. And Hunter looks every bit the part of that. And also the way that he and Jacoby are kind of playing off of each other as well. And then also add in the fact that Jimmy noted like he and Devontae are still kind of working through their continuity. Once they get that down with those other two guys, I mean, this offense is going to be really impressive. And again, like while they're continuing to work on that continuity, it's not like they're not on the same page. It's just a matter of like the intricate details that they're trying to build through there. But definitely seems to already have a really good rapport with Jacoby and Hunter. And again, nobody can stop Hunter. It's like a slippery bar of soap.
Yeah, and I think just real quick on the Devontae thing, like Jimmy, I think, nailed it perfectly today when he was asked about Devontae and kind of how that relationship's growing. And he goes, like, I mean this in the best possible way. I've never had a receiver like Devontae, which isn't a slight on anyone he's ever played with. Devontae is one of one, right? So we talk all the time about, Devontae getting to learn Jimmy, but it very much goes the other way too, where Jimmy goes, I've never worked with a dude quite like this, right? I know I've worked with guys that are similar in this vein or similar in that vein, but like Devontae is a different type of cat. And as a quarterback, like you have to learn how to kind of play within his game, but also understand like, hey, I can maybe give him chances and shots to do things that I wouldn't necessarily give other guys on a roster.
Yeah, so there's going to be a little more freedom to his game to be able to throw it up to them, to Devontae in particular, and I think we're going to see that a lot throughout practice again tomorrow as well as they continue to work on their continuity with each other. But I think the thing with Devontae too that's unique is, and Jimmy has said it, other guys have said it, he sees the game like a quarterback. And I'm sure for a quarterback, that's kind of almost tough to be like, okay, well, let's make sure both these quote-unquote quarterbacks see the game the right way, or the same way would be a better way to phrase that. And that's, I think, what they're kind of working through right now. And that's got to be fun for Jimmy to have a guy that is just on a completely different level that has such a uniqueness to his game like that. And again, you see flashes of it. And it's exciting for us at camp to watch and see because of what Devontae's game is and what Jimmy has done in this league. So once they get on the same page at a consistent rate, man, it's going to be deadly.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch, and hopefully we see a little bit of it tomorrow as well. But, looking ahead to tomorrow, Jesse, first off, can we please have a repeat of the weather today?
Oh.
Like, today was beautiful. I know that it rained, and yes, we need the rain, blah, blah, blah. But in terms of temperature, in terms of just overall ambiance, Oh, it was the best. But when we look ahead to tomorrow, like really what do you want to see from these two sides going at it in the morning?
Yeah, I mean, kind of more of the same. Maybe a little more juice to start, like we said.
I think so. That's what,
Yeah, it just kind of it did feel a little low energy. And maybe it was the gloomy skies. I don't know. Who knows what it was. But I want to see more of that. And then also these guys that we talked about today following it up, with bigger days. And for Jimmy, too, Max talked about it. He said, the last 2 days, he has been so on point. Yesterday when they were indoors, they were just in shorts and helmets and whatnot, but he was on point. Today he was on point towards the end of practice. Now let's see you follow it up, continue to stack those good days. That's what I want to see. Hoping to get a better look at the offense early on and just kind of see them do that. And then also, again, just the younger guys that stood out, specifically Nesta, Jade, Silvera, like we said. Now that these guys on the Niners offensive line know, okay, hey, that's a guy we got to look out for. How do you kind of build off of that and continue to grow from it?
Yeah, I think really it's just stacking good days, right?
Yeah.
We hear from Coach McDaniel saying, hey, day one needs to be just like day two, et cetera, et cetera. And so like to see what this group does really 1 to 90 tomorrow in another competitive session. And like to your point though, like let's have really 2 hours of high energy. Let's fly out.
Yeah.
I think the word I was looking for the first maybe period or two, it felt a little static.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it didn't feel as hyped up. Let's have a million energy drinks and go put the pads on and go to work as the last part of it did. So I would love selfishly to get 2 really entertaining hours of work in tomorrow. But to your point, right? Let's see what Nesta can do on day 2. What does Duke Shelley do on day 2? How does this offensive line hold up now that the Niners defensive line has had a chance to go back and watch this tape and say, hey, okay, this is the 3 things they did to get us yesterday. How do we adjust? How do we get better? How do we kind of improve over the course of a 2-hour session?
Very true. As you were talking, another guy that popped to my head, Chris Smith as well. I want to see him because he popped up a few times today. But I think too now that like maybe the nervous energy of day one, the first time you get to go against somebody that's not wearing silver and black is gone. Where's that energy from the start? I'm curious to see, what it looks like now as maybe guys come in a little more relaxed, a little more comfortable with the situation.
Yeah, and certainly I think the one part about joint practices, and we haven't touched on it quite yet, but the fact that, the guys that we're talking to you, today, you're going to see them again tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
And we saw a few moments of chippiness. We didn't see anything out of bounds or wild, but we certainly saw a few moments of people getting friendly with one another. I think that's a fair way to put it. And no shortage of talking. So I'm curious about some of the stuff, some of those conversations that were started yesterday. How do they kind of finish tomorrow?
Yeah, definitely. And to that note, too, I just want to say, and we said it last year when the Pats were here, it just seemed like very business-like. Yes. But here, there's a little more of an edge, I think, between the Niners in terms of the way that they talk and whatnot, in a good way. And I like to see that energy, and that is something that this Raiders team has because we've seen Max bring that same type of juice and that same type of energy every day, and the back and forth and the way they yap at each other. So I am excited to see the kind of back and forth talking back and forth between them all. I believe Jimmy was saying that Dre was talking to him, when they first started as well. So after they go back, they look at the film, they maybe get yelled at here and there, both teams, by their coaches about some certain things that did transpire in practice about so-and-so beating whoever and whatnot. Now they come back with, all right, hey, you got me yesterday, but today's another story. That's where I think we'll see more of that, and it's fun to see.
And I think you nailed it, too, where you compared the joint practices, today and tomorrow compared to what we saw from the Patriots last year. Obviously, both really about your business, but this one does feel a little, I don't want to say chippier, but like there is a little more juice behind it than there was with the Patriots. And again, part of it I wonder is the Raiders and the Patriots played during the regular season last year. There's maybe a different element. There's a different wrinkle to it. These teams aren't going to see each other until February at the earliest, right?
Exactly.
So I think for me, let's see what we got tomorrow.
I think one example too of that in terms of like the chippiness, but also professionalism with it is like, so again, we're talking a lot about the offensive or the Raiders defensive line versus the Niners offensive line because they were so close to us. But there was one rep where Max ran a stunt and went against one of their guards. I don't remember the number on who it was. But at the end of it, Max kind of finished the play, extends his arms, and has his arms extended to where, like, he's kind of pushing his jersey into his face. And they both had each arm, like, interlocked. And you could tell it was that kind of like, I'm not stopping.
Yep.
You're not stopping. And then as soon as they both let go, kind of give each other a little slap on the behind and go. Like, because it was like a respect thing. But there still was that level of, like, edge to it. And that's what you want to see.
Yeah, 100%. And we look ahead to Sunday, and I don't know what kind of edge we will see on Sunday, right? Preseason, a different beast. But when we look at this first preseason game, Jesse Merrick, when you're back at Allegiant Stadium for the first time in a hot minute, 1 o'clock start, by the way, on Fox 5 and NFL Network. But give me a guy that you want to see kind of ball out come Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, I'm real curious to see, who they put out there. But for me, a lot of the guys that I wrote down, just were on the defensive side of the ball. That I kind of, you asked me before we got going, and I was like, I want to see this guy. Top of the list for me is Chris Smith. He's a guy, we talked about him when he got drafted, just in terms of, Ziegler getting that text of like, you got a good one, all this stuff. And he's flashed at times here and there. So I'm really going to be watching him when he gets out there. Again, Duke Shelley. Adam Plant was a guy, the kid out of UNLV. Yep. He had a couple of really nice reps today. We haven't seen a ton from him. So obviously I would imagine he's going to get a lot of reps in this game. So I'm really going to be watching him as well. And then Nesta Jade Silvera, how you follow that up in the game itself. If I got to go to the offensive side of things and talk about some guys there, more than anything, just kind of the offensive line as a whole, specifically the right side. We talked a lot about on the last episode about Thayer Munford and Jermaine Illuminor and kind of the battle that's going on there on the right side of things. I'm really going to be paying attention to how both of those guys play, if they do both play, which I'd imagine they will.
Yeah, and I think just going to the right tackle position and staying there for a hot second is I'm curious to see how both guys kind of respond coming out of that game.
Yeah.
Right? Because, I don't think either of us anticipate Jermaine or Thayer playing into the fourth quarter. But I feel like both of those guys are going to be able to break a sweat, right? They're going to go out there and say, hey, let's see what you can do in kind of live action situation. So, but really I'm curious to see. One of them is going to, hopefully both of them have great days, but how do they respond after the fact? Maybe, and I'm just coming up, maybe Thayer's day isn't what he wants it to be. Well, how does he respond when the team gets back to practice?
Exactly.
Maybe Jermaine has a few plays that he wants to have back. Well, how does he respond? Or vice versa. Both these guys go out there and they show that, hey, we are starting right tackle worthy.
Yeah.
How do they keep stacking days after? So really, for me, we look at right tackle, and yes, I want to see what they do against the Niners on Sunday. But really, to me, that feels like the kind of first 100 meters of this race.
Yeah, I would agree so on that front. And I hope both of them do come out and kill it.
Yeah.
Then that makes the competition that much more fun to watch. The other thing, too, just in terms of offensively, in a high position or a high competition position right now is at receiver. Because we've talked about it. You look at the guys that you would imagine are a lock. Obviously Hunter, Devontae, Jacoby, and then I think you can throw Trey Tucker in there just because of, he was, 4th-round pick, and he's looked good. So there's a lot of guys battling for what could be the 5th or 6th if they choose to keep 6 positions or 6 guys in that position group. So those guys I'm really excited to see, but specifically Trey Tucker in that group. I want to see every day the Raiders offense and the Raiders receivers start the practice off with screens, quick screens, whatever it is. I want to see what Trey Tucker does when he gets the ball in his hands in space because we know that is a very electric athlete. So I'm excited to watch him kind of do his thing, but also him lumped in with a lot of the other guys that are more of the depth receiver pieces. I want to see what they look like in this game running this system with probably Aiden O'Connell calling the shots.
Yeah, and I think, too, to that point, I'm excited to see, we won't know for a few weeks, but how Dave Ziegler ultimately decides to build out that room because we talk about some of those depth pieces, and they're very different depth pieces, right? And so I'm curious, 3 weeks from now, whatever it is, what Dave ultimately decides to do and say, hey, maybe I want another speed guy, or hey, for that depth piece, I want a big-bodied guy who can be a good, good in the red zone, can contribute on special teams. It is a very unique room, and I'm excited to see kind of how Dave kind of puts the finishing touches on that. But another guy, 2 guys that I'm excited to see come Sunday, and it also remains how much we will actually see of them. But Zamir and Britton Brown, right? What do we see from them? How who gets the bulk of the carries? Who gets only 1 series as opposed to 2? Who shows, hey, I can do a little bit in the passing game? Those 2 guys, and I mean this in the best possible way, a bit of a mystery at this point in camp. Let's see it. Yeah. I want to see a little bit more of it come Sunday.
Yeah, that's the thing is, and I think we'll see a decent amount of Zamir just purely based off the fact that Josh noted, you're not really going to see his game until you strap the pads on and start hitting. And you can only do so much of that in practice. I think Zamir is one of those guys that is going to almost kind of energize him a bit more. You get hit and he's like, oh, yeah. And then the next one you get hit again and it just kind of keeps ramping him up. And so I think we're going to see him for a couple drives at least. And I'd imagine he gets a lot of work. And today he even kind of stood out a bit. Like we noted, the offense was a bit far away from us, for the beginning portion of practice. But I did see a couple times when they're working the red zone. Maybe it was just him finishing the runs, but he was in the end zone a couple times. I was really impressed with him. So definitely going to be keeping an eye on him. And Britton, a guy that just has a very complete game for a late-round pick. He's just flashed so many times. I am excited to see him to work too.
And the other thing to keep in mind, which is a fun little wrinkle of this too, like we are most likely not going to see Britton Zamir, Amir, Brandon Bolden, all those guys running behind a consistent first-team offensive line. So how do you do it when maybe it isn't as crisp, it isn't as clean, when maybe you have that quarter second less than you would if Colton Miller and Andre James were out there doing their thing? Yeah. How do they respond to that, right? So I think that's one thing that'll be a lot of fun to watch. And we talk about the preseason, we talk about it all the time, but kind of the game within the game. With preseason is the epitome of that. There are so many kind of battles within battles and quarters within quarters that I think are going to be a blast to watch. And honestly, dude, the fact that we're back at Allegiant makes it 1,000 times better.
I cannot wait. It's going to be like the ultimate tease, though, because we only play one preseason game at Allegiant until the regular season.
Oh, not even back till week 3.
Yeah.
So, we're going to be at Allegiant on Sunday, and then we aren't going to be back for 5 weeks? 6 weeks, something like that?
Just wild. Yeah. So, it is like we got to take advantage of this opportunity while we're there, really live it up at Allegiant. But I'm excited too, man, because you'll get that like game day feeling, and that's something we haven't had in a long time.
And the best part, old man Eddie clocking in for work. It's a 1 o'clock kickoff. I'm going to be home for dinner. I'm not going to be getting home at 11 o'clock. Like, it is the best. Like, I love, and to your point, it will feel like a game day because it'll be right around that 1 o'clock, 1:05, 1:25 kick. So our morning will feel similar. A few slight differences for preseason, like, I don't know if people really care, but not inactives, right? So you don't get that 90-minute, here's the 7 guys, 8 guys that aren't going to play. But it will look, it will feel, it will sound. We will get to go through the rhythm of a regular season game day, which is a blast.
Yeah, and I think that's invaluable to get it early, and then also, too, to go on the road for the next 2, I think is huge, too.
And we were talking with Dave about that yesterday, where he said, like, what we're going to learn from the next 2 preseason games, we learn a lot, but we also get a chance to learn how we travel, right? The expectation of how we carry ourselves when we travel, what a road Saturday, air quotes, looks and feels like when we're at a hotel instead of at this beautiful facility. So it's a period, and really it's training camp as a whole, but the next couple of weeks, a great chance to kind of learn your team and learn some of the things that you can't necessarily learn from seeing guys in pads running routes.
Yeah, not to jump too far ahead, but obviously after this game, they're going to go take the Rams on in some joint practices out there before their game. So that's a lot of time on the road. It's kind of that like quasi where you see some teams go on the road, and obviously how the Raiders used to go to Napa. I bet you there's going to be a lot of growth in that time in LA because it is just you. It's just football. You're on the road, and you have nothing else to concentrate on but that. I'm excited to see how the team comes out of that hole.
Yeah, comes out of it, how they respond, how they look in that game against the Rams, and then ultimately how they get back to work here and keep stacking those days, just like you and I are stacking episodes of this fair program that we are doing at the moment. But we've talked about a lot. We're going to see so much more tomorrow. We are not going to have a shortage of things to discuss in the coming days, weeks. And, dude, week 1's going to be here before we know it. But that is a long time away. But we have many, many storylines to follow and a lot of things to kind of figure out in between now and then. On our way out, Jesse, I know that the preseason is a big deal for all of us. But where can the people find you this weekend?
Well, I mean, contrary to what you said, old man Eddie's going to be home, not going to be at home till 11 o'clock. I will be on Sunday.
Look at you.
Because we've obviously got Sunday night football going on air and everything like that. And so once the game is done, we'll be breaking it all down, diving into who shined, who's shown. I know we didn't.
Shown, yeah. I don't know if we've ever. I gotta ask Rachel, our fantastic digital managing editor and grammar guru, if it is shown did. I don't know what it is.
As 2 like journalism majors, that's kind of we should know this.
I know, and I like to pride myself on reading a good amount. I still don't know whether it's shined or shown.
No, definitely. But having said that, we'll be diving into all that on Channel 3 after the game. I'm excited because that's my first opportunity to dive back into like. Yes, a game that doesn't count for the record books, but just a real game where real football is being played.
1,000%. It's going to be a blast, and we look up, the preseason is here. We're going to blink, we're going to go to lunch, and it'll be week 1, and let's do it for real. So, a great day at joint practices. The Raiders will be back on the practice field tomorrow, same time against the 49ers. So, for Eddie Paskal, my guy Jesse Merrick, everyone else at Silver and Black Productions, I should say. I have Nesta Jade Silvera on my mind. But for everyone at Silver and Black Productions, thank you for hanging out with us, and we'll see you guys next week for another episode of the Raiders Training Camp Podcast.